Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I am delighted to welcome an accomplished and respected lawyer from Salt Lake City, Utah, USA, Mr. Jeff Holman. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's really my pleasure to join you today.
Thank you. Jeff is a business focused attorney for innovative entrepreneurs, and he's the founder of Intellectual Strategies. So, Jeff, before we talk about legal stuff, tell me about your own journey and what got you interested in the legal world.
My journey has kind of been weaving in and out. I started as an engineer. I studied electrical engineering, worked in that field for a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
thought I would go into business, applied to a bunch of really nice schools here in the United States, and they all said, no, thank you. You need more work experience.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I planned to hold off on business school for a few years and somehow got detoured into this whole area of law. Somebody said, you should be a patent attorney. They're in high demand.
Mm-hmm.
And I went that direction. Long story short, I've been an attorney for a while now, and I did go back finally get my MBA, and I've settled on working with startups because I just kind of love the chaotic energy that surrounds the startup world. So that's a very brief version.
And what an amazing journey. And as they say, the rest is history, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, so Jeff, I was fascinated to read about the fractional legal team. Tell me about your model and how does it differ from traditional legal services?
Yeah, so I love the model that we've developed. It's really come about because having been in my own practice, serving clients, and then
Mm,
having gone in-house, working as an attorney in-house, I realized the first time I went in-house, I realized a couple weeks into that I've been practicing law the wrong way,
mm,
at least for the clients that I'm serving. So clients need much more of a business partner and less of a formalistic attorney a lot of times, especially in the fast-moving world of startups. So I actually, over the course of several years, working outside and inside, have just developed this model where we come in as essentially a fully staffed in-house legal team that's available to startups on a fractional basis.
mm.
So it's a lot like there's a lot of history around fractional CFOs,
Yeah.
fractional CMOs. We're the same thing, except instead of being in those fields, we're in the legal field. And
Mm.
instead of being one person to come in as an executive on your team, we're actually the entire team that the startup needs. So you get multiple attorneys with the expertise all available at different times as businesses grow and pivot
Mm.
and dynamically become the going concern that they hopefully become someday.
Very well said. And as you said, I've heard a lot about fractional CMOs and fractional CFOs, but this is the first time I've heard of a fractional legal uh, officer, if I can use the term. But my next
Yeah.
question, Jeff, is what are some of the kinds of legal challenges you have seen startups and companies that are scaling up face? And what kind of work do you do to help them?
It's interesting because in the startup world, um, the startup teams have most of the same problems, just on a different scale that a normal company has. So you think of a company with employees, they got employee issues they have to deal with, fundraising, supplier agreements, customer agreements, terms and conditions on the roads, like everything that applies to a normal, what
Mhm.
I'll call a normal ongoing business applies at some level to startups. So that's why they really need a breadth of expertise is because just because you start up doesn't mean that you might focus on one product, but you still have 10, 12, 15 different areas of law that could impact your business. Like, you could either find opportunities or you could run into roadblocks. So it's really at every level. And we actually have a lot of clients that contact us not because they have a single problem in their business, but because they've run into several different problems. And they've kind of, as startup founders are good at doing that, they compartmentalize. They're hyper focused on that product, on that customer, that ICP, on their MVP. And what they'll do is kind of just put the legal stuff into the closet. And they'll be
Mm.
like, oh, that's a problem I don't want to deal with.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll think about that another day. And so they get a variety of issues on a variety of topics, and they eventually kind of just say to themselves, I'm really tired of worrying about these things that I know are in that closet. I just need somebody to come and tackle them.
Mm.
The problem is when they go to hire an attorney, the attorneys are like, well, I can do this one, but I can't do those. Or, you need five different attorneys to take care of all these issues that you've let pile up. And so, when we come in, we usually come in and it's like, okay, let's do a little bit of cleanup. Let's clear out that closet for you, get rid of some of these monsters if we can, so that you can keep focusing on the stuff you like to do. And we'll then help you kind of build out systems and processes. So hopefully you don't run into as many monsters, or we can deal with them more quickly as they come up.
Well, I wish I had met you 20 years ago when I had started my first startup. But you're so right. I've often said this, that startup entrepreneurs are so focused on doing their business, a lot of their systems and processes and legal challenges don't get their priority. But what is the kind of flexibility? And that's something I was fascinated to read when I was preparing for my conversation with you. What kind of flexibility does your firm offer, especially for rapidly scaling up companies?
Yeah, it's kind of multi-dimensional, right? So of course, we have multiple people on our team with different expertise. So
Mm,
as a startup, comes up with an invention, they can get patent help and protect their invention. If they're building a brand called you or whatever other brand,
mm,
they can protect that with trademarks. We have a heavy IP background, but if they need a contract attorney, they need fundraising, they need maybe to solve a dispute that they've got going on or one that might be coming up. So one area of flexibility is you get the right legal expertise from the right attorney at the right time. Another is, and this is a big one because a lot of times you run into, I've got my attorney's going to do this, but my attorney can't get to my project, my little project perhaps, for like 2 weeks, or they don't call back for 4 days. If I'm a solo attorney, even whether in your company or outside your company, if I'm that only attorney that you rely on to do everything, I'm going to become a bottleneck.
mm,
But if I'm one of five attorneys, six attorneys that's helping you out, a lot of times there's some overlapping ability to say, oh, I can't handle this right now, but I've got another person on my team that can handle it. So you
mm.
get the flexibility of fewer bottlenecks, if you
Yeah,
will. That's
yeah.
another very big one.
Great response. You also just spoke about intellectual property.
Mhm.
Tell me, how do you help a startup to develop a robust intellectual property strategy?
Yeah, I spent when I was running my firm, a different version of this firm where I was so focused solely on patents and trademarks and IP, for several years right out of law school.
Mm,
And I got initially really frustrated, and then I got complacent, and then I got kind of, let's say, restless, right?
mm,
Because I was like, I'm helping companies like IBM or Intel put patents into their armory, and nobody really can tell me how this fits in to their business. And
mm.
that was at first, like I say, frustrating. And then I'm like, well, if they don't care about it, I'll do the best I can, but I have no idea where this fits in.
Right.
And like I said, I finally said, well, we got to figure out because IP and intellectual property is just another asset in your business in a sense.
Mm,
And all of your assets in your business should be strategic assets to add value to, your ability to become a leader in a certain aspect of your industry with a competitive advantage that's sustainable, all of that normal
mm,
strategy stuff.
mm,
And so and so I worked through and I'm like, how do we help inventors see that the invention is more than just a product idea? It
mm,
is another piece that should be supportive of the business strategy overall so that there's an objective there. So
mm,
I spent a lot of time thinking about that, putting models together, systems to rate ideas relative to business strategy. And so that all that has kind of led into, when we sit down with inventors, what we really want to focus on is the business. We want to say, what is the business? What's your strategy? What's your business model? What are the assets that fit into that business model to make it successful? And how does your IP as one asset align with all of that? Is
Mm.
it, a primary driver of your revenue, or is
Mm.
it maybe a secondary supporting type of thing? So there's
Yeah.
various aspects there.
Very well said. You also mentioned a few minutes back that you support uh, startups when they're doing fundraising. And that's a very
Yeah.
critical area. I know I paid a heavy price because I didn't understand a lot of the terms when I first raised money. A term like liquidity preference actually took me to the cleaners at some stage. I'd love to get your
Mm.
perspective on how important is a legal strategy for a startup.
Yeah, so it's super important. And of course I'm going to say that because I'm an attorney, but
Absolutely.
here's the difference. If you ask any first-time founder what they think about legal strategy, it's going to be pretty lightweight,
Mm.
right? I'll engage somebody who I need to. When you ask a second time, third
Mm.
time founder what they think of legal strategy, they have somebody on speed dial. They're like, I'm not doing the same thing I did before.
Mm.
I lost a lot of money. I didn't protect my product. And so there's just there at every turn, your business can be exposed to these risks
Mm.
if you're not aware of them. And most first-time founders just simply aren't aware. And
Mm.
so that's where we as attorneys, if we're really business minded, we can say, hey, you've got exposures in these areas. Now, some of these are big risks, some of these are small risks, some of these are likely to happen, some of these are not so likely to happen.
Mm.
And so we can help balance that out and we can help them say, where do you want to put the resources that you do have
Mm.
with everything that's in place? And we can focus, essentially focus them on the problems that are problems today or soon to be problems instead of maybe spending time building out things that are down the road a little bit further for them. We'll get to that when we get to that. Let's
Mm.
take care of the pressing things now.
Well said. Well said.
So yeah, legal strategy. If you don't have it, you're gonna learn it, and you're probably gonna experience some pains learning it.
Mm.
So
Mm.
uh, there's no way to get around
Correct.
the learning aspect.
Correct. The other thing that I have often seen, both as a founder and with a lot of people I mentor, is handling a lot of the regulatory compliances. And they keep changing all the time. I'd love to get your perspective on how does your legal team help businesses stay compliant with the ever evolving regulatory landscape?
This is probably the hardest area from my perspective when working with startups, because we
Mm.
we do work with kind of some categories of startups, e-commerce, SaaS, some what I call deep tech, people out there creating technology for
Yeah.
20 years from now. And so there are certain areas, but as you mentioned, the law is alive. It's changing all the time, and the resources that a lot of startups have are pretty minimal.
Mm.
So we have to rely on our exposure that we have across multiple clients
Right.
to be able to draw on that and say, okay, we know you're really small, but these are the things you're going to see. If it's a consumer product, you've got pricing issues, you've got product liability issues coming up, insurance things, and a lot of people are just like throw it out on the market, see what
Mm.
happens
Mm.
without understanding those. If
Mm.
you're in technology, you've got export controls type of issues.
Yep.
Can I actually send my product overseas? And what does
Mm.
that mean to send my technical data somewhere else to export it? Most people don't know that they can export technical data by sharing it with somebody sitting next to you in your office
Mm.
because they're a foreign national, even though the data has never left your
Correct.
country.
Correct.
There's just so we have to draw on just this, array of
Mm.
experience across clients
Mm.
to try to provide the best counsel for
Mm.
each company in its own situation.
Well said. And the US is very, very similar to India when it comes to a federal structure politically. Uh, I know one of the challenges a lot of startups face is that there are laws at the central level and there are laws at the state level. And I know that it's the same in the US as well. How do you and your partners and associates keep abreast with so many changing laws in all the 50 states of America?
Well, the bottom line is we don't
Mm.
because we don't practice in every state, right? Our
Right.
team is small.
Mm.
There's this aspect called multi-jurisdictional practice of law,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
so it's pretty complex and it's changing
Yeah.
even today. we do need to know where our clients are located. And we need, because you can have a client who's, I was talking to a friend at lunch today. He's an in-house counsel. He works at a company that is located, headquartered out of Chicago. They are, they're registered as an entity out of Delaware. He works remotely for them. They have offices in other places and they
Mhm.
have customers around the country. And so you look at that and you say, well, how do we navigate all of that? And so you have to have local experts. If you're going to go into court, you have to have a local counsel to represent you within that court. And then our team, this is where our team kind of differs. We act like the home base advocates for the startups, for the companies and clients we represent. And
Mhm.
so we will do what we can where we are jurisdictionally allowed to do that, or where sometimes we can reach a little bit away from where we're at. And then we act as the general counsel, or an analogy some people kind of recognize. We act kind of like the general contractor on a building project, right? Commercial or residential building. You've hired a general contractor. They go out and they hire and manage the subs, make sure they're in budget, make sure their work is good, that they're doing what needs to be done to completion. And so we'll do that if we have to go out and say, hey, we've got a case in Wisconsin right now that the client's asking us to represent on. We've got one in Virginia, and we're not licensed there, but we've reached out through our network, found local people in those places, and said, hey, can you work with us to
Mhm.
help represent our client for these specific matters?
Well
It,
said.
it's complex,
Mhm.
but we're really there I think the key takeaway from what I'm saying is we've got to be mindful of all the rules that impact us as attorneys, and we don't want that to complicate our clients' efforts. So we act as a central hub to try to manage that for them, for ourselves, for them.
Mhm. Well said. And Jeff, with the advent of so much technology, and I'm a much older person than you, from the boomers generation. I remember whenever there was any legal thing in the corporate world, there were massive amount of books to be read. Today,
Mhm.
everything's available online. My question is, how is technology and more recently artificial intelligence changing the legal profession, and how is it making easier for you to do business?
Oh, it is pretty hectic. It's dangerous in a way. And I'm not saying that like I dislike it. I've got my Chat GPT subscription. I
Uh,
love it. I'm on there a lot. We have to be careful though, because as we know, it gets stuff wrong. We've probably all heard about the cases where attorneys have submitted briefs to the court and the court has come back and said, hey, this is a big problem. You've cited cases that don't actually exist.
right.
Your AI bot made up a case and you didn't check it, right? That's a huge problem.
Hmm.
But it really is, it's speeding everything up, right? AI is just making information available. We can do a lot more searching, we can do a lot more research, we can do a lot more digging, create more
Hmm.
content super fast. And we had a client, actually they weren't a client at the time. We had somebody reach out to us recently that we've been in touch with them. They're creating some tools to
Hmm.
help people draft patents faster, right? And they called us and they said, "Hey, we would like to hire you to help make sure, to help improve our product and make sure that our tool is creating product the right way." And
Hmm.
so we're able to be kind of the experts behind the speed, if you
Hmm.
will.
Hmm.
And that's pretty exciting for us. I'm super excited to see where it goes. I don't think we'll be replaced by AI, but I think we better learn to use it. It'll make us more efficient. And if we don't use it well, we'll probably get outpaced by those people who do use it well.
Well said. Jeff, I have time for two more questions for you. My next question is, can you share for my viewers and listeners a success story of any one client who has benefited a lot from your fractional legal team? And of course, I don't want any names.
Yeah, I could share a couple if you like. One would be we've come on early stage with some clients, and
Mm.
we've had meetings where they say, "Hey, you were recommended to us. We want to work with you," and we say, "Okay, let's roadmap out let's roadmap out where you're going in the next 12 to 18 months
Mm.
so we can kind of say what are the legal things that we'll need to do with you. And they're like, and we did a little bit of that, and they're like, no, 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 you don't understand. Like, we got to get started. They were one of
Mm.
these companies with some skeletons in the closet. So they start out, and they start out at a really small scale. We need you a little bit.
Mm.
Over the course of a couple of years, they've grown and grown and grown. They've expanded,
Mm.
and so we've just really allowed that. In fact, I think they've more than 10x'd in the amount that they use us because
Mm.
their company was 10xing, right? And
Right.
so they were getting the resources to be uh, more careful and more capable
Mm.
on the legal aspects of their business. So we would do
Right.
that.
Very interesting.
Another one, if you don't mind, I can
Yeah, yeah,
share real
please,
quickly.
please, of course.
We have some other clients. Uh, Several of our clients, because we work with entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
they're very visionary, right?
Mm.
The CEO it has ideas all the time. And
Mm.
so a lot of our clients, because they're smaller, because they're very entrepreneurial, they will come and they'll say, hey, I've got this business and it's going, we're making money, and I need your help on these things, right? And almost inevitably, 6 or 8 months in, they're like, hey, Jeff, I had this idea. I'm going to start this other business. And and so not only are we scaling with their initial business as it grows, they're oftentimes using that business or using their skill set to leverage into another startup that they'll
Mm.
run in parallel or
Mm.
run with some partners. And so we'll scale across businesses that are being developed by the same team oftentimes, and
Mm.
as well as scaling up with a single business as it grows. And it's just fun to be in that
Yeah,
environment and
yeah,
work with
yeah.
people who are super creative.
Fascinating, fascinating. And my last question for you, uh, given that from my perspective, you're one of the pioneers of fractional legal teams because I'd never heard of this before. What trends do you see as a lawyer that will shape the future of legal support for startups and entrepreneurs?
I'm going to go with the one we're talking about because I believe in it 100%.
Mm.
This fractional. So there are a lot of attorneys who historically have operated as fractional legal counsel. They usually call themselves outside general counsel,
Yeah.
and that's just somebody in a law firm who will kind of be watching your business on a regular basis. I have not found anybody, and I've looked and looked and looked. You know, who's doing this model? Nobody. It's us. So we're having to educate the market. But as I reached out, I've been the chair of some sections, some groups within our Utah State Bar here. And I reached out to the Utah State Bar recently. I said, hey, we don't have a section that helps people in this fractional model, whether it's a solo attorney or a group of attorneys like I do. We don't have anybody, but it's a new enough model that we need to have a section, a group dedicated to fractional attorneys. It's going to grow.
Mm.
And I put the feelers out, and they're like, oh, you got to have 25 people who come on board and sign a petition or whatever.
Mm.
And I put some notes out to people, and we had 30 people before too long. We've had our first lunch. We're kicking off this section, and meanwhile, somebody in another state said, hey, how do we do the same thing? How do we
Mm.
start this? And I think the fractional movement, because of COVID, work from home, the mobility, the cloud-based, like all of that, limited scope representation, if you're familiar with it, all these things are just leading up to the ability for us to work in
Mm.
a more granular way with clients. And for those of us who are really business focused, it's a better way to do it. It's really the right way. In fact, if you don't mind, I'll share. I have a few mentors, and one I was talking with
Oh.
um, several months ago. Uh, she's told me several times how much she loves our model
Mm.
and might join us someday when her current job,
Mm.
transitions. And she said, hey, I think what you're going to look for, what you should be doing with this model is you're a small company, and there are a lot of the really big, really expensive, $1,500, $2,000 an hour law firms out there who really would benefit from essentially having an in-house team at their clients to help
Mm.
help them deliver services better to these small clients. So
Mm.
that's one of the trends we're looking at
Yeah.
moving into is essentially establishing relationships with the large firms and being their boots on the ground in the companies, which should increase communications,
Mm.
provide better implementation of the things that they're asking to be done
Mm.
and help them know exactly what work needs to be done based on the real ground movements of the business rather than kind of from a distance like they often have to do. Anyway, I think fractional is a huge movement, and I believe 100%, as I said, in the fractional team model. So I think that's going to grow too.
Well said. And on that note, Jeff, I just want to say thank you so much for speaking to me about your fractional legal team model. We covered a lot of ground. I understood how the fractional legal team works. I think it's a boon for a lot of startup entrepreneurs who can't afford multiple legal counsel from different firms in specialized areas. We covered a lot of ground. We spoke about the flexibility that you were able to offer. We spoke about the challenges of intellectual property and the need for a proper strategy. We spoke about a long-term legal strategy. We also spoke about some interesting thoughts that you have on technology and how you see the future of the legal profession for startups, and that clearly moves towards the fractional legal team. Thank you for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.